Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of the Gospel According to Marvel. My name is Derek Weston, and I'm here with my friend Zane Sanders.
Hello, everyone.
And we got our first episode done, and then we've had all sorts of ups and downs and life changes and things like that. But hopefully, we're back on a roll and back into. Diving into all things Marvel and spirituality.
And we have a little more consistent schedule now.
Yeah,
that we can work with.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. And so hopefully we'll have our episodes out a little bit more consistently and be able to generate some energy and feedback and conversation and all that good fun stuff. So Zane, last time we talked was, I think it was like right before Doctor Strange came out.
Yeah, it was that week.
Yeah. So you've seen it?
Yes.
What were your just kind of like?
Yeah.
You don't have to go too deep into it now. We'll obviously talk about it down the road. But what were your thoughts about Doctor Strange?
Generally, I really liked it. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was a great choice for Doctor Strange. He played the role well. I still have a lot of questions. I need to go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
But it's kicking something else off.
Yeah.
For the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so I'm excited to see where that's going.
What do you think that something else is?
I mean, so obviously they're going to have to start tying in their cosmic entities and the Earth entities on a more regular basis, apart from the Avengers, with Infinity War coming up.
Yeah.
But it's almost as though they're going to start killing off some of these heroes that we've grown to know and love. And Doctor Strange is sort of, from what I've been reading and understanding, he's sort of a new Iron Man almost.
Yeah.
And so, but where they're going to go with that, who knows? Thor Ragnarok comes out next, and that's going to set the stage for some big stuff, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. I mean, and it was really cool, just in terms of thinking about tying in some of the cosmic stuff. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie yet. But the cutscene at the end was a scene of Thor hanging out with Doctor Strange. Mm-hmm. And so, excuse me. So you kind of get the sense already that there's going to be a tie-in with, Doctor Strange having these more mystical powers, and then tying into Thor and Asgard, which has already been sort of the more out there part of the MCU, and which seems like Doctor Strange will be a really good fit. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, at some point, excuse me, a little bit of a cold. There's, it does feel like they're going to have to start weeding some of the characters out that we've gotten used to. Even if it's just like for contractual reasons, but I mean they're getting pretty loaded, and
for the roster for Infinity War, I know the Russo brothers have already said there's in the double digits the amount of heroes that they have to work with, so something's gotta happen.
Yeah, and you can only do so many. You can only do so many of those scenes, like the airport scene in Civil War,
right?
Before, I mean, and that only worked because they were fighting each other. When they're all on the same side fighting something else, and then you've got Guardians of the Galaxy mixed in, and you've got other characters that haven't even been introduced yet. There's going to be a lot of different moving pieces there.
Absolutely.
Which reminds me, so busy time for Marvel. I guess maybe it was with Doctor Strange that the Spider-Man Homecoming trailer came out. So that's actually kind of on the horizon there. You seen that trailer? Did you have any initial thoughts on that trailer?
Yeah, Spider-Man is probably my favorite hero that Marvel has. And Same. So I know Sony has tried this twice before, with some success.
Yeah.
And some failures in their own right, rightfully
Yes.
so. But I'm really excited for Tom Holland to sort of redefine this character for a new generation.
Yeah.
And the trailer shows that that's where they're gonna start.
Yeah.
They're starting in high school, and it's really going to be almost not that it is going to feel like this, but almost like a Mean Girls for the Marvel Cinematic Universe type of a thing. That might be the wrong.
No, I totally knew what you meant by that, so that works.
Good.
Yeah, and I like. I don't know how old he actually is, but Tom Holland at least has the appearance of someone who you can do a couple of movies with him in high school. Whereas, like with Tobey Maguire, it was like even from the door, it was a stretch that he was going to be in high school very long when you first introduced him. Andrew Garfield a little bit more, but even then, but Tom Holland has this look that like they could do 2 or 3 movies with him being in high school, and I think that's a part of. I think that's just a part of Spider-Man that's just really fun. That like that balancing out him like trying to be a superhero, clearly feeling like, and the trailer makes it seem like he clearly feels like he's auditioning to be an Avenger. And at the same time, he's got high school stuff going on. He's got hormones, and he's got classes, and he's got, all the things that high school students deal with. So I just think that's going to be, I think it's going to be really fun, and I think we haven't had enough of that in the movies.
My biggest hope for this movie is that I know they're sort of playing around with the idea of Sinister Six with the Vulture and whatnot, but my biggest hope is that they really take a cue from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon series with where they bring in S.H.I.E.L.D. and they have White Tiger, Luke Cage, Iron Fist. I know they're not going to be able to use them for this, but that sort of idea, almost like a New Avengers or Young Avengers type feel to it. So
yeah, and I think that also with them needing to make additions, and they've already said after Infinity War it's going to be less big full roster movies and more like mixing and matching of characters.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of, I mean, just like historically in the comic books, everyone has teamed up with Spider-Man. So, I mean, there's so many fun things you can do with pairing that character with other characters. So, I'm really excited for that.
I misspoke earlier.
Oh.
I said that Thor Ragnarok was the next one coming out, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is actually the next one.
And is Spider-Man after Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, Spider-Man's after that, and then
Thor.
Then Thor. I think November. I don't actually have that date.
I think it's towards the end of the year.
But yeah.
So then, we've also had a couple Guardians of the Galaxy trailers, which have been pretty outstanding. Thoughts on those?
Well, I mean, they're pretty typical of what we've come to know for Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn has done a great job at like showing us clues about what it's going to be about, but still not really leaving us wanting more. Yeah. So I don't entirely understand what the storyline is going to be based on, especially with Russell.
Kurt
name
Russell.
slipping. Yes, Kurt Russell playing Ego.
Yeah.
The Living Planet. And how that's going to tie into Infinity War. It's like all over the place, and I love that that's what's going to happen.
And there's that's I'm with you. Like there's been no indication of what the storyline is. Like they're fighting something, and we have no idea what it is. And there's also been some hints that like Yondu and Nebula are kind of on the side of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is interesting.
Yes.
but then it's just, the thing about the trailers is it's just done a great job of capturing the humor and the action of the first film, which just kind of just makes you just super excited to jump back into that world, because it's really fun. And the first one was such a fun film. And then again, yeah, I mean, we know that this is leading towards Infinity War, and how are they going to be, how are they going to begin to start connecting those dots to the larger MCU? We know, obviously, there will be Infinity Stones involved, and Thanos will be involved, but it'll just, like, I think we're now getting to the point where we're getting so close to it that the how of all of these things coming together is starting to get really exciting.
Right.
And then, just last kind of, two last kind of things. So Iron Fist, trailers have been up.
That whole thing with the Defenders that they're setting up, I'm so excited. Luke Cage was fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't say this at first after watching it, but I do really feel like it was better than Daredevil.
Yeah.
And the Iron Fist one looks incredible too.
Yeah. They're I just, like, Marvel has done such a great job of slow build with their characters that has just been, it's just brilliant. It really is. So the Iron Fist, and I think what they've done, I sort of kind of knew the story with Daredevil, way less with Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. So they're bringing these stories, that are, unlike Iron Man, unlike Captain America, these aren't stories that I know really well. And
right.
and they're introducing them in some really compelling ways. And
super relevant
yeah.
for what's happening in our world right now, too.
Absolutely. So, and that's been, Luke Cage did that very well. And again, they're building towards something. They're building towards the Defenders, and they're building towards this team that is going to be a lot grittier than the Avengers, and a lot more, it's hard to say down to earth when you have bulletproof people, but it feels like a little bit more grounded than the Avengers. So that's going to be fun, and and then the last thing just before we could talk about Marvel stuff all day, obviously. There's just so much good stuff coming out. But yeah. I was wondering if you saw, there was some concept art that came out the other day.
Mm-hmm.
It was concept art for Black Panther, and also some concept art for Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And the Wakanda stuff in Black Panther got me super excited. Like, that's going to be a great film, and it's driving me nuts that we have to wait a year for that.
Yeah.
But the Thor Ragnarok concept art, they've been teasing at this for a little bit, but clearly what I think is going to probably be like the big set piece of Thor Ragnarok is this gladiator match between Hulk in what we know as the armor from the Planet Hulk series, which I haven't read, but I've seen tons of pictures from it, and Thor. Like, they're gonna be in a gladiator match. And
either they'll be fighting
sold.
each other, or they'll be fighting something together. I don't know. It's
well, the one picture that I saw was kind of just a sketch, and it looked like they were going at each other.
That's very, yeah.
And I mean, seriously, like, I will buy my tickets right now. I mean, off of that sketching, it wasn't even like rendered. It was just a sketch of the two of them in gladiator uniforms, like midair, jumping towards each other. Sold.
Yeah.
Sold.
Yeah.
I'm ready for that.
Yeah. This is pretty sneaky too, how Marvel is doing this to get around the Hulk rights. Because right now, Universal Studios owns the rights to any Hulk solo movie, which with The Incredible Hulk, which we're covering here, it was sort of in partnership with Universal.
Right.
And so now, in order to get around those rights to do a Planet Hulk movie, they're just throwing it into a Thor movie, which is funny to me and
Which is,
really well done.
You do what you got to do, right? I mean, 'cause
Exactly,
this is something that fans have wanted to see, and their hands are a little bit tied. I can't see why Universal wouldn't want to let go of those rights because they're not going to do anything with them.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then Marvel's smart enough to get around that stuff. So
Yeah.
So that's a good segue. Let's jump into Incredible Hulk. So doing a little bit of going backwards. I was looking at the timeline of when the movies were released, and it kind of boggles my mind that Hulk came out just 2 months after Iron Man.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
That's weird.
And it's, in my mind, like, I don't remember that happening so quickly together like that, and I don't think it's happened since.
Yeah, me neither. I definitely don't remember them being released that close together. I mean, I definitely remember seeing both in the theater, but I guess it was the same. I guess it was the same summer. Do you remember? You saw it in theater?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters. I remember like having this feeling. I saw the other Hulk movies as well.
Yeah,
and just sort of going to see it because I knew it was next in this story they were creating, and so I really didn't have my hopes very high for it.
Yeah. So when you did see it, what were your thoughts when you originally saw it?
I was not confused. I was conflicted because I liked it, but at the same time, I wasn't really sure why they did it. I didn't see really where they were going with it. I mean, it was obvious they wanted to bring the Hulk into all of this, but they could have done that in a whole lot of different ways. But the way, and well, we'll get into the movie, but I did enjoy it. And it really is, I don't recall what number I put it on my list, but it's sort of one of those movies that is easily overlooked. Mm-hmm. But they really did a good job with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just looked at my ranking list again, and Incredible Hulk is towards the bottom half of my list, but it's not in the bottom. And I definitely liked it when I saw it in the theater. Definitely really enjoyed it. And when we made our first list, one of the things that I pointed out was I actually feel like Hulk is hurt by the later films because for two reasons. One, the Hulk special effects have gotten much better. They've gotten significantly better at animating the Hulk and making it look real and making it look more a part of the scenery. I mean, the leap in the technology from 2008's Hulk to 2012's Avengers, just in terms of animating the Hulk, is pretty significant.
Yeah, it was an incredible difference.
Yeah. So there's that. The other thing is Mark Ruffalo. And at the time, I think Ed Norton did a great job. And I generally like Ed Norton as an actor. And when they first announced that Ed Norton wasn't going to be in Avengers, I remember actually being kind of upset. And I don't remember if it was he asked Marvel for more money or it was one of those sorts of things. But now, it's hard. Like, Mark Ruffalo is that character for me, and so it's one of those things where it's like, I do enjoy the movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it is one of the more underrated of the MCU films, but yeah, I think it's actually kind of hurt by the fact that Marvel, in some ways, just progressed.
Yeah. It's interesting. I guess they wanted Mark Ruffalo first to play the part of the Hulk.
Interesting.
But I forget. I remember reading it, but somebody, either Marvel Studios or the director, wanted him, and then one of the other ones decided that they were going to go with Ed Norton. So
interesting.
It's funny that he was brought back in.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess I just kind of imagine it as a very different movie with Mark Ruffalo. Hard, we can't know that, but so we have to deal with the movie that we have, which again is a perfectly enjoyable movie. So what were some of the things that jumped out for you as you watched it this most recent time? What were some of the things that you grabbed hold of?
I think what The Incredible Hulk did that previous versions didn't give us was sort of twofold, in that they really showed us a Bruce Banner that we wanted to like. And then they allowed the storyline to build into something more for the Hulk. I think it's difficult sometimes with this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of a character to really give credence to both sides of that character. But they did a good job of at least exploring that better. And then Mark Ruffalo obviously does that much clearer in the Avengers. So that kind of stood out to me. Another thing, the opening credits, that was such a good way to really bring everybody up to speed as to the origins of what happened without dragging them through the same story that they've done for the past how many times. So.
Yeah, that was really well done. And, and I was thinking about that. As I was watching that, I was thinking, I really hope they do something similar with Spider-Man Homecoming, because I really can't stand to see Spider-Man's origin story on film one more time.
Well, they did sort of do that in Civil War. They kind of just skipped over it.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, guys, we know the story. I just don't want to see it again. I don't we're gonna. He got bitten by a spider, and there's just only so many ways you can show that. So if you just let's speed that part up. I agree. That part was really well done and not dragging us through it again. I think one of the things that I agree. I think and again, this is one of the strengths of Ed Norton and Ed Norton's casting, is that he does give us a really likable and sympathetic Bruce Banner, and I think that there's an incredible arc that's going on with Bruce Banner that I think goes from Incredible Hulk into Avengers and actually into Age of Ultron as well, which is that he really is, as much as Tony gets the moniker of doesn't play well with others, Bruce Banner's the loner. Bruce Banner's the one who intentionally isolates, who intentionally goes off by himself, who really feels like he can't connect with people, and is forced to live this very, very tragically lonely life. There's this one scene, I think it's when he's in Guatemala, where he's walking up the hill, and they actually use the music from the old 60s television show, which is just this very sad piano tune, which was usually played at the very end, because Bruce Banner is this tragic man who walks the earth alone. And you get that feeling again recaptured of this very sad man who walks the Earth alone and has to hide and is misunderstood and is so worried about hurting the people that he loves and becomes very very isolated and alienated because of that. What did you think of this film and the ways that they show Bruce Banner's relationship to the Hulk?
For this movie, sorry, I wasn't expecting that question. That was a really good question.
Sorry.
For this movie, I feel like they really do show them as separate entities.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as Betty tries to like still reach out to Bruce in that moment, when the Hulk takes over, like he really is the Hulk. But Betty sort of bridges that gap for Bruce Banner in a lot of ways. And sorry, that was a really good question.
No, that's okay. that's all right. I should have prepped you.
No, that's okay.
No, I agree. I think there's, and again, without jumping too far ahead, I do think there is an evolution of Bruce's relationship, and here in Incredible Hulk, it's very much the relationship of like. I want nothing to do with the Hulk. Bruce is like, I want to be cured of this. I want it gone. And he even goes as far as to say that, he doesn't remember a lot of what happens when he's the Hulk. He is almost like he's in a drugged or hallucinatory state that's completely like an altered consciousness that's completely different from who Bruce is. Like the Hulk is completely other for him, and he like you were saying, he almost really rejects the idea that there's a part of him that's conscious when Betty tries to tell him that I saw something and it seemed like you recognized me, and he's just gonna like, no, that's not me in there. That's just this big monster, and I want nothing to do with it. It has no part of me in it.
Yeah. Which is interesting that you see that mindset shift towards the end of the movie.
Yeah. Because by the end of the movie, he's kind of. I don't know, he's kind of like, well, I at least have to gamble with controlling this thing.
Right.
So what else? What else jumped out for you what else stuck out about this film for you, watching it again?
So this is the only Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 1 film that Nick Fury doesn't appear in. So I don't know if it was, again, with the rights or what, but they still tied it in. His name appears in the opening credit montage with all those pictures. And then they also, Marvel released its Prelude comic series for the Avengers called Fury's Big Week. And it bridges the events between Iron Man, Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, and Thor.
Okay.
So because all of those sort of happened around the same time, at least in this part of the Phase 1.
Yeah.
And so you find out some more background information about this movie in that, which I found was interesting, that they sort of backtracked and said, oh, wait, we missed some of these details and we need to...
Like, what kind of details are in the...
So Natasha Romanoff is in Fury's Big Week.
Okay.
And she's sort of helping Fury clean up the mess that happens with Samuel Stearns at the end.
Okay.
And then I know they deal with the Thor incident, which you see most of that in the movie. Mm-hmm. And with Iron Man 2, you see those things. But so it's sort of, like I said, a bridge into tying all of these films together better.
That's cool. I should check that out at some point. Yeah, so even though you don't get Fury, you get several references to Shield.
Hmm.
You again at the beginning in the opening montage, and there does seem to be the sense that General Ross seems to have a fairly close connection to Shield, which
Right.
I don't think I caught on my earlier viewings of the film. And again, maybe it's with that character being reintroduced in Civil War. Maybe it's just one of those things that kind of clicked on for me now. But it does seem like he's got his finger on the pulse of a lot of these special projects, and he knows a lot about the super soldier projects that have existed in the past and research of that. And it instead of him just being kind of this angry military guy, I think watching it this latest time, I got a little bit more sense that he was connected to the larger intelligence agency and some of the bigger secrets that are going on
Hmm.
behind the scenes in Marvel, which makes him a more significant character.
Right.
That they were trying to. Well, let me back up here. I mean, do you get the sense as you've watched this? Do you get the sense that they were simply trying to replicate? I mean, we're gonna get to this later at some point, but were they simply trying to replicate Captain America, or was there more going on here than just a simple let's see if we can make Steve Rogers 2.0?
Well, and I think a big part of it was that they were trying to recreate some sort of super soldier program. And it seemed as though it was almost like they were doing it even though they weren't supposed to be doing it,
Yeah,
sort of a feel to it. So it was in secret. My biggest question about the Hulk in general, at least in this movie, is for being such a brilliant scientist, which Bruce Banner is, how did he not know what he was testing on himself when he became the Hulk? Like, that's a little confusing to
well,
me.
well, and they explain it with a throwaway line that I totally agree with you is unsatisfactory. It was just like he was so confident in his work that he tested it on himself. I'm like, well, okay, but that's just bad science. Like
Right. Yeah.
you just don't do that. I don't care how confident you are in your work. That's just dumb. Don't do
Yeah.
that. Don't test the gamma radiation on yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, I don't know, isn't that like brilliant scientist 101 that you don't inject the gamma radiation on yourself?
Well, and like it seems as though he didn't know it was for a super soldier program.
Right. Right.
And so, like, why was he even testing it on himself? Like, it was
So
just
yeah. So there were some pieces that I caught this time that I didn't catch before. So it seems like what they were doing was they were trying to. Um, he was trying something that was like, can we make a human resistant to gamma radiation?
gotcha.
And I guess he's thinking that would have like positive medical applications, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Like
I
I don't know what you do with gamma radiation. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know what you're doing with gamma radiation. So he thought he was doing this thing that was going to create some sort of gamma radiation resistance in humans, and that was going to be a good thing for humanity, and not a super soldier
right.
gateway drug.
You brought up earlier the theme of loneliness and how a lot of times the Hulk really shows us that
Yeah.
theme. Another theme that I felt connected to General Ross in particular, is the abuse of power
Mm.
in a lot of ways. I think General Ross gives us a dark look into what obsession looks like,
Yeah.
especially as he literally creates another monster in order to defeat the monster
Yeah.
he already accidentally created. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great observation. I mean, he's so obsessed, and there's a point where you feel like even in another movie and another story, he would have learned the lesson of his obsession, because there's a point where I think I want to say a helicopter or something crashes, and a big fireball comes at the Hulk and at Betty, and the fire like basically consumes both of them, and he thinks that she's been killed, and yet Hulk kind of shields her, and she's unconscious, but she's fine.
yeah.
She's singed or whatever. And you would think at that point that he would be like, oh no, my obsession with this monster almost cost my daughter her life. Instead, he goes to Blonsky and says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to up that super soldier serum and see if we can make you a little crazier. Yeah. I mean, he's very obsessed. And yeah, it does seem like it's an obsession with power, and I think again, as we're you and I have been going back and forth a lot on social media about sort of what's going on in the world right now, and it's just kind of easy to see that really scary like how people get very compromised in terms of their morals, their values, when getting more power enters the equation.
Yeah. Well, and I feel as though General Ross and Bruce Banner both give us this look at to what to do with power and how to handle it. It reminds me a lot of actually of Paul's words that he says, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep doing." And so, like, it's right there that there is this two different sides to what you can do or what you should do, and they both take very different approaches to that power.
How would you describe Bruce's relationship to his power?
Well, at first, he doesn't want anything to do with it. So he's trying to run away from it or get away from it or keep it away from people because he knows the destruction that it causes. But eventually you can see him come to terms with that power that's in him and really start to better understand it so that he can control it, like we said.
Yeah.
And then General Ross, on the other hand, he really falls into that obsession and lets that power, not that he's the Hulk, but he lets a power take over him to the point where he is, even by Civil War, you can tell his life's been tough.
Yeah.
And he sort of has this bitterness
Yeah.
to him about all superheroes, not just the Hulk.
Not just the Hulk. Yeah. And that's so good. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting, again, a line that jumped out to me in this last viewing was Abomination, who is way more vocal than Hulk. He kind of pins the Hulk against the wall at one point, and he says, "You don't deserve this power."
Yeah.
And Abomination has sort of the same relationship to power, and maybe even worse relationship to power than General Ross does, because he's kind of got he's almost got like a drug addict kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
to it, of like,
Yeah.
he's obsessed with fighting. You know, he's obsessed, like he's talked about the fact that he's going to fight until he can't. And then he has this first encounter with Hulk, and he's like, nope, I want another shot at him. So they give him the super soldier serum. Hard to say 5 times fast. And so he has his first fight with Hulk, and he's like, he gets real messed up. And he's like, then he heals, and he's like, nope, I want at that again. And then he gets to the point where,
Give me some of that Hulk blood.
yeah,
Let me taste what this really feels like.
You know what I could use right now? Hulk blood. Yeah, and then it's just like, and he again has no, by the end of it, like, not only has no no thought for what he's doing to others, like clearly has no care about the fact that he's destroying Harlem, but he also really doesn't care about what he's done to himself. He doesn't care about the fact that, like, he's nowhere seen asking these questions of, will I turn back? He wants to go full throttle ahead with these new powers and, like, Hulk out everywhere and destroy everything.
No matter the devastation that it causes to anything. Yeah.
It just really doesn't matter to him, like, who gets hurt, and that's himself included, because it gets him into this place where he can have this ultimate fight with Hulk, and have this sense of being an ultimate power, which I think is really just interesting. Like, the obsession that power can give people really is really dangerous.
Tim Roth was probably my favorite actor in this movie. He did such a great job. And I love that technically he's still in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
So, like, we could see him again someday.
Which would be great.
Which is cool, yeah.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be so cool. I would love to see that character brought back. And there's so many, for me, and there's so many loose threads from Incredible Hulk that I would love to see carried on. Another theme that I think, just as in terms of thinking about sort of some of the spiritual aspects of this film, I think maybe the most obvious theme here is of anger, and what do you do with anger, and what do you do with so much of the film is Bruce running away from anger, right? And it's not just that he's running away from the power. He's not just running away from the Hulk. He's running away from anger, and like, he actually, though, I mean, it's kind of a funny scene, but he's kind of run away from all strong emotions, and, like, he has this moment where he can be intimate with Betty, and he's like, oh wait, no, I can't, because my heart rate, I can't get too excited. And it's like, I one of the things that Brené Brown, who's an author who I love, talks a lot about how when we cut ourselves off from emotion, if we don't allow ourselves to feel that, we may try and shield ourselves from feeling the really low lows, but sometimes that also cuts us off from feeling the really high highs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I thought. And again, I think that makes Bruce, again, a really tragic figure, because he is, in some ways, closed off from the full God-given range of emotion.
Right.
But
and a big part of that too connects to his self-induced isolation too.
Yeah.
He's not only trying to run away from those emotions, but he's secluding himself away from people and emotions, which is terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think when we talk specifically about anger, and again in our faith tradition, we just the lectionary reading for this past Sunday was about, you've heard it read that thou shalt not kill, but but I say to you, Jesus says this on the Sermon on the Mount, that if you call your brother or sister a fool, then you've sinned. And so many of our there's this passage, I think it's in one of Paul's letters, that your anger does not produce the righteousness of God. And so often we squish down anger because we think of it as a quote unquote negative emotion. And yet I still kind of go to Jesus in the temple, turning over tables and driving out the money changers. And in John's gospel, he makes himself a whip to do it, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And there are appropriate places for anger. And I think part of what makes the ending of the movie cool, again, as Bruce sort of takes on the responsibility of needing to stop Abomination, is his understanding that emotional self can be used for something good. How just kind of as you think about your faith relationship to anger, how have you wrestled with that idea of like how you like, we talk about righteous indignation and we talk about like holy anger and things like that. Like, how have you navigated in your own spiritual life how anger manifests?
Probably about a year ago, I read this book called Unoffendable by Brant Hansen, and it really transformed the way I thought about anger and whether it is we have the right to even be angry. And you used the example of Jesus in the temple, and I think that his argument in the book is that Jesus is allowed to be angry because he's God. He's allowed to have a righteous anger because he is God.
Sure.
But we are not, so that we don't necessarily have that same right. And so anyway, the book itself has really transformed the way I think of anger, as has the Avengers, because Bruce Banner says he's always angry, spoiler alert. And so that's how he learns to control his anger. And it's almost like those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. And I am still trying to figure out what that means. I'm a father to two toddlers, so I get angry a lot.
Yeah.
And and so
been there.
So trying to understand my own emotions of anger and what it is to express grace in those moments too.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, I think. And so I definitely connect with Bruce Banner in him trying to control it.
Yeah. That's the thing for me is, so I was raised in a house with a stepdad who was a very angry man and let that anger come out in some really hurtful and unhealthy ways. And as a parent, when I remember this a very specific moment when my son was maybe 2, and he did something, I don't even remember what it was, and I smacked him, and I went into the other room and just wept because there was a part of me that was like, I don't ever want to parent from the angry place that my stepdad parented from. And I think that's I think that's really good to be aware of not letting anger take over us, not letting anger turn us into something that we're not letting anger control us in ways that and take us places that we don't want to go. At the same time, I really do feel like there are places in life where we should be angry. I think we use them. I think we use anger sometimes for the wrong things, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anger is not necessarily helpful for that person who cuts you off in traffic, right? But when you see people being exploited, when you see people being oppressed, when you see people being abused, then yeah, that should create an anger, and that anger, it shouldn't be a festering anger. It should be like a motivating anger, right? Like that should cause you to work for the reduction of those sorts of things in the world. I struggle so much because I feel like our so much of our faith really does try to push down anger in a way that I think makes people bottle up, and I think for men especially. I think for us, like we really can like get bottled up with our anger to the point where then it builds up, and then you do kind of Hulk out, and you usually, when that happens, it's around the people that you love the most, and you don't want to ever get to the place where your anger takes over in that way that's really scary or frightening for the people who are around you.
Yeah, I think another theme that really pops up in this movie tied to that is the search for meaning. When bad things happen, because in Bruce Banner's mind, like this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Him
becoming the Hulk, and he doesn't want it, and so like trying to deal with that in healthy ways is a theme that I saw come up through that. So
yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think that's really. That's really kind of the whole thing there is that I think that's something that he wrestles with. I think, again, that's kind of part of Bruce Banner's arc, is that this is this freak accident, right? In his mind, a freak accident that he probably in some ways blames himself for, right? And in the Avengers, he makes a comment to Tony Stark that Tony kind of makes the implication that the Hulk saved his life, and he says, saved me. That's interesting. Saved me for what? And Tony says, we'll see. And so this whole idea of he's actually kind of fighting that there was a purpose for this,
right?
And by the end of the Incredible Hulk, he's still very much fighting the idea that this had a purpose. What do you do with that last scene? That last scene of him in the cabin, and he's controlling his heart rate, and then he opens his eyes and they're green and he's smiling. What do you do with that last scene?
I mean, so it's obvious to set up for more times that we will see the Hulk, but I think more than that, he at that point has accepted his role in the devastation that has happened. So while he may not have been in control, like he's accepted his part in it. And so he's trying to better understand himself and the anger within in a big way. And so I think, much like our conversation just a little bit ago about the anger that we can all feel sometimes, I feel as though he's trying to put himself in a better place to be helpful when that does happen again. So it was very hopeful at the end, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the smile at the end is it's kind of an evil smile. It's kind of like a ha ha. But I agree with you. I think it's about him gaining control of the anger, him gaining control of the power in a way where what we're going to see going forward is that this can become a tool, right?
Yeah.
And not just something that takes over his life that he doesn't have control over, but this is now something where maybe it can be used for good. Maybe he can find some meaning in it. Maybe he can find some purpose in it. And that's going to lead him into this larger world where maybe this thing that I think to use this language is actually really helpful here. This thing that was a curse can actually kind of turn into a blessing.
Yeah.
A blessing for him and a blessing for, the world that's going to need a Hulk at some point.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on the Incredible Hulk?
So Martin Starr is in this movie. He's later credited in the Incredible Hulk movie novelization. He's the computer guy in the computer lab that's eating the pizza that he comes up with.
Yeah.
He's eating it. So Martin Starr's going to be in Spider-Man Homecoming as a different character completely, which isn't the first time that Marvel's done this with people. But in the Incredible Hulk movie novelization, that character was actually credited as Amadeus Cho, which is super interesting because that is Helen Cho's son, who later becomes the Incredible Hulk in the comics. Yeah. So, there's some weird crossovers happening, and with Martin Starr being in Spider-Man Homecoming, I know it's not the first time they've done that with actors where they've changed their role, but that's a really cool connection. Plus, I think he's about the same age as Helen Cho, who shows up in Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
To help create Vision. But
interesting.
So those little nods to the comics are really fun to me.
Yeah. I and one of those things. What's his name? The guy who the character's name who was Mr. Blue.
Samuel Stearns.
Yeah. He is the I'm hoping at some point,
yes,
we see him as the leader.
As the leader, yeah.
And
and again in the Fury's Big Week, he starts transforming into the leader before Natasha Romanoff shoots him and in the leg.
Oh,
okay. and then they place him in Shield custody. So he is in this universe, he's the leader right now, and he hasn't played out that role yet, but so I am hoping that they save that for something.
Yes. I would love. Yeah, that's a character that I think would be fun to have against the Hulk, against the Avengers. I think again, there's so many loose threads there that I think it would be really cool to bring some of those things back.
Yeah.
One thing that is. One final thing. I don't know. It's not a big deal, but I think the cut scene, the post-credit scene with General Ross and Tony Stark. Tony comes up to General Ross in the bar and says to him, "We're forming a team." And at that point, that's not actually what's happening just yet. So it doesn't actually fit with the whole, unless, there's some timing issues because Tony was never really the impetus for putting the Avengers together. But it was still kind of a cool scene that ties it to the larger world.
Yeah. Well, and later in the one shot with Agent Coulson, that happened before Thor.
Yeah,
I think. That scene comes in to a fuller scope because they talk a little more in there. And so I think all of this is sort of happening all at once at the beginning, and they've steered away from that and sort of made it.
Yeah, they kind of made it
yeah.
more cohesive. Because
Yeah.
I actually think one of the, and I just vaguely remember reading this, that one of the early drafts of the Avengers had had Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, at least spending the first part of the movie subduing the Hulk. Like that was their goal, and then eventually the Hulk's on the team and they have to fight some other larger villain.
So they just moved that to Thor Ragnarok now.
Exactly, or somewhere else. We're going to see a whole bunch of Avengers fighting the Hulk. So that's the Incredible Hulk. And then so our next movie is Iron Man 2, which is 2 years after Iron Man and Hulk, which now we would have riots in the streets if we had to wait 2 years for another Marvel movie. I was like, no! Can you gosh, how spoiled have we become?
For real. Well, between the spacing of the movies, which has been relatively short, to everything that's on Netflix and ABC right now, there's always something that's on for Marvel people.
We've gotten so spoiled, and I hope that it continues.
Me too.
So, I think that's a good place for us to wrap up.
Okay.
We'll be back in a couple weeks, and we'll be talking about Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2, not very high on my list of Marvel movies, but we'll talk about why that is in a couple weeks.
All right.
So,
hey, thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. If you guys would subscribe to us on iTunes, that would be awesome.
Very good.
And continue to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Zane E. Sanders.
And I'm at Derek L. Weston. And and you can shoot us some thoughts about the show and suggestions and questions. And
our shows, we're also on Twitter, aren't we? We're at Marvel_gospel.
Nice. Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
I forgot because
I know we haven't
used
used
in a
it
little
so
while.
long, but that's okay. We're gonna get back into the swing of things. So until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Yep. See you guys.